From pretending like a whole superpower doesn't exist, to some of the science just not making any sense, here are some of the biggest plot holes in Marvel movies. Starting with, why did Thanos give up his first Infinity Stone only to get a different one? At first glance, it seems like Thanos makes a major mistake right off the bat in the MCU. After all, why would he give his only Infinity Stone, the Mind Stone, to Loki so he could attempt to get the Space Stone? Especially considering Loki is literally the god of mischief. It's basically in his blood to do something wrong. It almost makes no sense that Thanos would give away the Mind Stone when he was ultimately trying to collect all of them and create an Infinity Gauntlet. What if Loki had lost it or handed it off to someone else? It would be a major roadblock in his ultimate quest. Speaking of quests we don't understand, Thor doesn't actually need Bifrost to travel. I mean, think about it. Thor's decision to destroy the Bifrost in his first movie is a huge moment. After all, it was the only known way for him to get back to Earth and Jane Foster. But don't worry, Thor obviously found a way back because he shows up on Earth again in the Avengers. How? Well, that's never really explained. All we get is a single mention of dark energy or matter. Regardless, Thor can travel freely after this point without the need for the Bifrost. By Thor, the Dark World, it's back in action and he can jet off to any place his heart desires. But even with the return of the Bifrost, Thor doesn't need it anymore. He's already proven that even without this magical bridge between realms, he can travel wherever he wants, whenever he wants. Which reminds me, Thor had been to Earth before. When Thor first gets sent to Earth, he's understandably confused. After all, this Midgard is a whole new world for him. He has no idea what the people are like, how to talk to them, or even where to start. But this isn't actually Thor's first journey to Earth. In fact, it's just one of many. In the Marvel Universe, Thor and other Asgardians have made trips to Earth before, like when Odin and Loki came down. These early interactions formed the basis for Norse legends about the characters that later inspired Marvel's versions. So, while Thor claiming this is his first time on Earth may be partially true, it's not completely accurate. That's not the only thing, though. The Pym particles make no sense either. The MCU has always been loved for pushing the boundaries of science fiction, since it's a franchise full of impossible, superpowered heroes and villains. But for some viewers, this hand-wavy science isn't enough. They need a logical explanation behind the MCU's tales. Take Ant-Man, for example. I think it goes without saying that an ant-sized superhero just can't exist in real life, but the MCU has still gone out of its way to explain the science behind it. According to the MCU, Pym particles let Ant-Man shrink by making the distance between each atom smaller. But then there's the quantum realm, a place where Ant-Man needs to be even smaller than an atom. It seems impossible, considering that we already know how small an atom is. This isn't the only science that doesn't make sense, though. It's not just science, though. Even some of the story doesn't make sense. I can't forget about the inconsistent history of the Celestials. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is full of strong creatures, but none quite as powerful as the Celestials. First introduced in Guardians of the Galaxy, we meet these ancient beings when the crew visited nowhere and encountered the Collector inside the head of a long-dead Celestial. In that scene, they show us an image of a Celestial using an Infinity Stone to destroy a planet. In Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, we learn that Ego is the last living Celestial, but Eternal then reveals there are still more of them out there, even though it was established that there was only Ego and no one else. The MCU did the same thing with Gamora's backstory. In the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, we get a glimpse into Gamora's backstory when Nova Corps arrests her and the rest of the soon-to-be Guardians. Her key details state she's the last survivor of the Sohobori people. But it wasn't until Avengers Infinity War that we got to hear what Thanos did to these Sohobori people. According to him, he halved their population, and this was his way of preserving resources so that the remaining half could live a life of bounty, a plan he also had for Earth. But here's where things get interesting. We know from Gamora's background information that she's the last Sohobori survivor, which means Thanos either lied or did a really bad job of preserving resources. While I'm on the topic of uncertainties, Tony and Steve keep switching their personalities. When it comes to Iron Man and Captain America, the ideological divide couldn't be wider. Tony Stark is a self-made mogul who shirks authority at every turn. His final act in the first Iron Man movie was to openly reject government oversight and reveal himself as Iron Man to Congress, a powerful, rebellious statement. On the other hand, Steve Rogers is an old-school soldier created by the US government to fight its most dangerous enemies. It's no surprise then that these two characters ended up on opposite sides when Civil War rolled around. Tony siding with the US government and Captain America fighting against their regulatory measures. But how did we get there? Age of Ultron attempted to lay the groundwork for this character arc, but it felt a little rushed. Sure, Tony's tech-driven worldview clashed with Steve's more traditional outlook, but many fans were left wanting a bit more nuance and explanation. That said, although their ideological differences remain strong today, both characters have managed to put their differences aside to fight together on several occasions. You can say that the switcheroo was a little too convenient sometimes. And that's not the only thing. Remember when Tony needed a miracle cure? I hate to be the one to say it, but Iron Man 2 is probably one of the worst films in the MCU. And part of the reason is probably because of one of its most outrageous plot points. In the movie, Tony Stark discovers he needs a new element in order to save his life. As if by fate, he finds out that his dad, Howard Stark, had already created what he needed, but he kept the information hidden away in several puzzles. Yep, you heard that right. Tony had to solve a bunch of code words and riddles just to uncover his dad's secret creation. Talk about an unlikely Deus Ex Machina. It's all just way too convenient and unrealistic. Like, I know Marvel isn't exactly supposed to be real, but they really could have tried a bit harder. But nothing is as bad as pretending like a whole superpower doesn't exist. MCU got rid of the extremists completely. Have you ever wondered why Tony Stark hasn't used his super advanced tech to regrow limbs or heal wounds in the MCU? After all, Iron Man 3 introduced us to extremist technology, which was capable of doing just that. We got a glimpse at its power when Pepper Potts was saved with it, but then it fell by the wayside, never to be seen again. Weirdly enough, no one ever thinks of using this life-saving tech when other characters are injured or lose limbs in subsequent movies. Sure, it might not make as much money at the box office for people not to see their favorite superheroes suffer, but overlooking a technology that's been proven to work could come back to bite the MCU in a big way. Those were the biggest plot holes in Marvel movies. See you in the next video.